everything that a man needs. What's your name?
Autumn Night.
You got potential, but you ain't ready yet.
If it's one thing I know how to sell, it's the experience.
I need you to break her hand.
Who better to learn from than an OG like me?
Mercedes' last dance. I'm gonna take over your Sunday night set.
You know how fellas go crazy for the new girls? Once upon a time, I took a wrong turn.
I've been up and down this river looking for you.
I got the heart of a lion. I got no love for the ones on the feet.
Life is just a long day's journey into tomorrow.
I'm gonna go hard till they lock me away.
You just gotta make it through the long, dark nights.
Great, welcome. I am so excited today to be with the Writers Guild Foundation inside the writer's room with PValley. So exciting. Our first question, I'm going to go around. I want you all to kind of introduce yourselves. Tell me how you got started in the industry. But quickly, I'll just do, everybody I think knows who most of you are, I think. Katori Hall, the creator, showrunner, executive producer, writer of Hurt Village, Hoodoo Love, and of course, PValley, which gave us PValley. And also an August Wilson Playwriting Award recipient. I am just such a fan of your work.
Thank you, Mama. Appreciate
Patrik Ian Polk, co-executive producer, Noah's Ark, which I am a young queer. You changed my life. Thank you so much. I love TV. I love gay stories on TV, and it's all because of you. You are an icon. You gifted us this year at the 15th year anniversary of Noah's Ark with a quarantine episode. Thank you so much. Tamara P. Co-producer, you wrote on The Leftovers, and you're currently developing Freshwater, which I am so excited. It's one of my favorite novels that I read last year, and I cannot wait to see it be adapted. And Jocelyn Clarke, also so excited to have you here. You're currently a senior dramaturg at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., and previously we had also talked a little bit. You were a lead theater critic with the Sunday Tribune for 9 years. Currently, I write criticism, so seeing you go from criticism to TV writing inspires me in so many ways. So I'm very excited to have you all here to talk PValley. So again, just quickly, if you could go around, how did you get started in the industry, the TV industry?
I guess I'll start. Hi, everybody. I'm Katori Hall. And how I got into the TV industry, hell, barely. I barely got here, y'all. So what I mean by that, I started out in theater. Was up in New York, started out as an actress. Very quickly realized that there was way more power, I felt like, on the other side of the table, the people who were creating the plays. And so after my acting school stint, I actually went to Juilliard. And I was so happy that I did that because I ended up just finding out, what my ministry was in terms of wanting to use my body, my voice, all the talent that I had to tell stories that were from the drama lens. And so really, really worked hard. And I would say that part of my journey is how I ran into Jocelyn Clarke. Jocelyn actually became, what would you call it, Jocelyn? You like my dramaturg, right? Yeah, like my Ace Boon Coon dramaturg. I would send him all of my plays, like everything that I've ever really worked on. Even in the play world, Jocelyn has helped me figure out how to write better. And so was just so thankful that he was able to slide over from the theater world with me into the TV world. And so, you know, PValley was a play at first. And so over 4 years, I actually adapted it, reworked it, reshaped it into the TV show that you see today.
Yeah. Let's go to Patrik. I don't know how everyone's logos are laid out, so.
I grew up in Mississippi, and you know, just really as a queer kid growing up in the South, you know, in the 80s, I found solace in television and film, and at a very young age, decided that's what I wanted to do. I think Spike Lee kind of came on the scene when I was in maybe junior high school, and that solidified, okay, that's what that life is, that's what that career is. So I went to film school, USC, started working, kind of stumbled into a job as an executive, like when I was like 21, 22 at MTV, and kind of learned the industry that way. And then eventually transitioned over, made my first film 20 years ago. It premiered at Sundance. It's called Punks, the first Black gay feature film, American, produced by Babyface and Tracy. And then after that, Noah's Ark, and then a couple of more films, The Skinny, Blackbird, and then I came back to TV because when I started, it was very much like kind of do mainstream or, you know, be on the fringe. And so because I wanted to tell Black gay stories, I just, you know, made up my mind that I would live on the fringe and that would be okay. But over the years, that started to change. So I went back to TV around 2016, being Mary Jane. Then I wrote the 2-hour Mary Jane finale. And then while I was writing and then shooting that, Katori and I had the same agent, and she was like, "Oh, they're looking for, you know, someone for this show, and it's set in Mississippi." And I was like, I read the play, I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, that's I'm all over this." And thankfully, it worked out. So that yeah, because it's really, as I've told Katori many times, it's sort of definitely, if not my proudest work, it's top 2, you know. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Tamara?
Let's see. You guys can hear me. Let's see. Where I began, I moved to LA when no one was really like in my tribe was really moving to LA, and I became an intern. I just started from the bottom. Now we hit. I started from the bottom as a Sony intern, Sony Pictures, and I did like 7 different internships. Like I refused to leave that. I used to call it Sony University. I was so scared to death of what I was seeing and what I was learning about the industry that I just kept rotating internships. Like, and so one of the execs there, actually one of the lawyers there, was just like, you have to leave. You like they got me paid jobs, and I was like, nope, not ready. And I would just scam my way back into an intern. I could literally call HR and be like, I need you guys to hire me, rehire me. Don't tell my boss, and I would just show up. And so they talked me into going to grad school because I was not interested in school at all. I barely got out of undergrad, and I went to UCLA. I actually got into the graduate program in screenwriting. And that was, I wouldn't even say it was a game changer, but it was in the way I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to be serious and actually do this thing. And then I just took off. Like it really, I loved it. And I ended up working a staff writer's job on a show called The Fosters, which was a very like cute, queer, you know, lesbian couple with like a blended family, you know, and I was the Black writer, which I didn't know was a thing at the time. I was like, oh, you want me for my skills? Oh, you know, maybe not. And so no shade, love you. Actually, let me just take that back because I realize this is public and this is not just us in a room. No, they gave me, I got a really great experience on The Fosters. And then I just like decided that I needed to go into cable and stay there because I wanted all the kids to be on heroin. They were like, that's not what we're doing here. So I was like, I want to go to cable. And I need something darker, and I was able to hop over to HBO, and they really shaped my perspective and allowed me to just like do, you know, the things. And so I ended up working with Damon Lindelof on The Leftovers, and then it was like, boom. You know, once you do something like that, it really kind of changes your perspective on like everything. And you know, we're here. I met Katori actually after The Leftovers room, and we just clicked instantly. And I just knew I was going to be with this one forever. So that's it. I'm sure I left some things out, but so I left some juice out, some dirt out, but I'm gonna.
we can do that later.
Let's save that. And Jocelyn.
Was interesting. I first met Katori, I think in 2012. Is that true? 2011, 2012. And we hit it off. I mean, amazingly. And we were working on 5 of your plays simultaneously. I remember we did this weekend reading of your plays, and we stayed in contact and worked on a play called Blood Quilt, which is extraordinary. And then I was in Minneapolis, and I saw in this paper this play PValley was on, and I contacted you and said, "Is this still running?" And you said yes. And then I went and I saw PValley in Mixed Blood in Minneapolis, and was completely blown away by it. And was blown away by what was happening with the audience in terms of as a theater event. And so Katori and I just continued our friendship and our relationship together. And then when she said, "Will you come and work in this room with me?" And you've been showing me different drafts of the pilot episode of PValley. I said yes, and came over, and so I came in as a staff writer, and not for the first room. This is how Tamara and I only met each other for 35 seconds, one Wednesday afternoon. But then I was in the second room and the third room. So, but how I entered, sorry, to answer your question, in terms of the industry, was completely by accident. And again, it was about a connection with an artist, which was, I was teaching at the National Film School in Dublin, Ireland, because I live and work in Dublin, Ireland, and travel back and forth. And one of my students asked me to help him develop a screenplay, which I did, called The Young Offenders. And then the BBC picked it up and said, "We want to turn your film into a TV series." And he came and he said, "Do you know how to do this?" And I said, "I have no clue." And then we started working on it together and did 3 seasons for the BBC. And so that was my first kind of immersion into television. And then and PValley has been a phenomenal kind of experience in terms of just immersing myself in a world that I already loved from years before.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrik, I love what you said about, you know, thinking you had to exist in the fringes, because PValley is a show that is not in the fringes. It takes the fringes and it puts it right in front of your face. And that's what I love about it. It tells queer stories. It tells the stories of Black women, especially in the South, which we don't really see. And I think a lot of that strength comes from the writer's room, the full writer's room, which, looking at, you know, everyone who wrote in this room, it was so diverse. You had women of color, trans women, and it seems like a lot of women who, you know, hadn't really, I'm sorry, a lot of the directors you brought on board is who I meant to say. A lot of the directors you brought on board were women of color and trans women. And so a lot of them, I think, had also only directed music videos. One of them was like 23, incredibly young. You know, what was it like to trust your story with such a diverse young crew of directors?
Yeah, I think in terms of that thing of trust, I had to go with the people who felt like their souls were matching the material. I think of that in terms of the writer's room. I think of that in terms of directors. I think of that in terms of actors. And, you know, for me to be able to kind of break the rules, so to speak, when it came to hiring was very important, because I knew that the show was breaking many, many, many rules. In the way that we were trying to tell stories, and in the way that we were trying to really center this female gaze. And so I always say that, you know, I tried to hire some men there. Like, I tried. I had my interviews. I, you know, sat down with quite a few folks. And the question that kept on not being answered was, like, what is your definition of the female gaze? And the men really didn't have an answer, or their answers kind of were sliding into a place of like, oh, I don't know if you want this job because you want to hang out at the strip club a lot, or what. And so the fact, and I think it had a lot to do with the fact that it was just a question that they hadn't even thought to answer. They didn't have to deal with it in their work. And so why would this question even keep them from getting a job? And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that everything does seem to be viewed through a patriarchal perspective. And so, knowing that I wanted this story about strippers, about Black women strippers, to feel as though it was about their humanity and not their TNA. I felt like, the women who were coming to the table just had a really interesting approach. I think they were already dealing with it in their own work, and that lived experience of being a woman in this world, and people assuming certain things about you really fed into their artistic choices. We had a lot of conversations about how are we going to do nudity in this show. Like, we gotta be naked. Like, that's what folks do at the strip club. Like, there has to be that. But how do you do it in a way that does not get in the way of the story? And so we talked a lot about framing techniques. We talked a lot about point of view, and how the audience really needed to feel as though they were placed in the high heels of the women. They really needed to feel as though they were walking in the world, viewing the customers and everyone who comes in, and the other dancers through the characters, which happen to be women. And so we knew that we were kind of, stepping over a lot of landmines, because as Black women, we have inherited a very complicated history in terms of imagery. The fact that we have been hypersexualized for so long, and to step into a world that is based on hypersexualization, it could have been really, really tricky and salacious. But I think the fact that this cadre of female directors, with their lived experience, with them investigating that in their work already, combined with the writing that is so specific to character, and these characters happen to be women, I think trusting them was just kind of like the obvious thing to do. Because I think if I would have went in the direction of just getting these named male directors, things could have fallen off the horse quite quickly.
Yeah. Patrik?
Yeah, what she said. There was another interesting aspect, even outside of, I think, the male-female issue, which was sort of the respectability politics of this world and people's reactions to this world. So sometimes you even had female directors that would approach it like, oh, these broken people, and it's or people who just didn't get the world that this show was set in, and would come in with ideas like, instead of this sort of very working class, poor people's kind of thing, can it be this instead? And I wish I could remember a specific example. Katori, you probably remember.
There was a Black female director who was like, why does Mercedes have to be a dance coach? Why can't she be a tennis coach?
Yeah. Yeah.
She shall remain nameless.
Yeah. And the show obviously plays with those respectability politics, because you can't write a character like Mercedes and not sort of think about the empowering ways she uses the female gaze. There's beautiful ways the camera lingers on a man's watch. I love the scenes where she's teaching people how to, to notice a mark. And she's saying you want to look for this, and no, that's too flashy, and you want to look for this. And I talked to men who watched that scene, and they were like, see, these are just these gold digging women. And then women, I watch it and I'm like, no, this is smart, this is resourcefulness, this is also planning, this is strategy, this is the way that the show captures that, and the directors that you brought on capture that is so perfect and beautiful. So I think people still struggle with that respectability for sure.
Yeah, it's like a salesman going into a party or a gathering and trying to identify who's going to buy my product, who can I sell this to, who has money to spend. It's the same concept. And I think sort of approaching it from that point of view, because before working in the strip club world, there are all these tropes and stereotypes, and everybody's broken and horrible fathers, and everyone's been sexually abused. And then you realize things like a surprising percentage of all women have experienced sexual abuse, not just strippers, like anybody. So it's just getting into the mindset of things like that was really interesting, especially for me coming from this place of doing all this Black gay work, focusing largely on Black gay men. It was really kind of cool and interesting to come into this world and do really interesting things. And you could tell Katori had really done her research. She had really talked to the people in the world, because there were so many interesting like details and things that we just never think about, that never get shown in movies like Players Club and what have you. So yeah.
Yeah, Tamara, did you want to?
Yeah, I think one of the incredible things about not just the writer's room, but just Katori's perspective is that, Black cultures are complex. Black American cultures are complex and multi-layered, very stratified demographic here. And I think that I am more interested in unfiltered, authentic voices and stories. You talked about the respectability politics of it all, and I did not grow up with that kind of like weight on my shoulders, because I attended Pan-African schools when I went to HBCUs, and I didn't really understand what the gap was between the stories that we were trying to tell, or the story that Katori is telling, and the perspective of some of the viewers on the other side. I'm like, we're telling this story for our audiences first. They already understand everything. What is there to, so I've always approached Black storytelling, queer storytelling from a sense, from a place of entitlement, where we do not explain. If you would like to join, you can join. If you need subtitles, then you can click the button. It's right there for you. But the processes of creating or just reporting from location, like we're live on location. This is what's happening in our world. Would you like to join us? Katori was the only Black showrunner that I've ever worked for who approached the story as it was occurring right there on the ground. And that I was like, girl, you got me for as long as you want me, and it really created a wave of like difficulty on the other side, which we'll get to eventually, in terms of like, executives and understanding it, and, people not necessarily, the question really has always been, whose perspective is centered here? Who are you writing for first? Who are you targeting? Are we targeting white viewers? Are we targeting, you can say you're targeting everyone, but Katori was very, very, very clear that this was a story that was being told from the perspective of strippers in Memphis, Tennessee. There we go.
Chuckalissa, Mississippi, which is Memphis City.
Chuckalissa, Mississippi. My bad. Sorry. So that the authenticity and the unfiltered nature of the material. And in that case, you needed people whose souls were connected to the work. That's the only way that you can put together a structure for the story. So,
yeah.
Jocelyn,
did you want to jump in on that one, or?
Well, I just think it's important to say that Katori's vision is incredibly conclusive, but it's also very uncompromising. And she said, "This is the world. I'm presenting you the world in all of its complexity, and you have to work at it. It's not something that is spoon-fed to you, but actually challenges and demands that you pay attention and that you think about it, and that you respond to it in as fully as you possibly can. So that in terms of the room." In the two rooms that I was in, and I'm sure this is also Tamara's experience, was that Katori is very, very open, but she's also very, very clear about what it is that she's interested in exploring. And she demands a kind of level of collaboration and attention that is very clear, and everyone brings their full game to it, because this is a very serious work of art that we're making, and we all have to be involved in it. And, and so that when you're pushing back, against people who, people who are saying, why are you telling stories about poor people? Why aren't you doing this, this, and this? The real clarity about what that resistance is and why you're pushing back. No, it must be this way, and this is the story that we want to tell. And Katori's really excellent at grounding you in that, and so that it becomes a very much a moral enterprise as much as an artistic enterprise in many ways.
Yeah.
And I'll just add very, very quickly, that was the other thing that really appealed to me, was this idea that we are telling stories about, it's not like, that thing of, that's, I guess, started with the Cosbys, where it was this sort of bland, generic, upper middle class world that all Black people on TV lived in. And it's like, where are the poor people? Where are the people who are like struggling to pay that light bill, who are putting the lights in the cousin's name because they got, like, where are the real fucking people? Like, so that I think is great that we're seeing that, because where else do we see that on TV? I jokingly tell Katori, this is the Blackest shit on TV today, period.
Yes.
Maybe ever.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think, and I wanted to get into this. One area where you see that is, I grew up in the North, but most of my family's from Texas, and a lot of them, when they speak, I cannot understand them. I have to be like, can you slow down? Your accent is so heavy. And they just are like, girl, if you're going to understand or you're not going to understand, I'm not going to repeat myself, And it's like you said, Tamara, it's like, I have to do that work, and I'm happy to do it. And I love that PValley is the same way. If you need to turn on the subtitles, turn them on, because there is a beauty to the language and the way it's written and then the way it's performed that you have to find. And I love finding the rhythm of it when I'm watching the show. There's something that is Shakespearean almost to the actual dialect that the characters use. So I wondered if you wanted to talk sort of about the...
Wait, it's not a dialect. It's a language, and it's just a language. It's not a dialect. It's not different. It's normal. It's normal from the perspective of those characters, the perspective of that particular demographic. I just wanted to chime in. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's not a unique or exoticized. It's just super normal. Yeah.
It's the term that I have been using is slanguage. And when I had to describe it to the powers that be, that obviously did not look like me, it was that thing of very clearly articulating that this is a form of communication that fuses slang and accent and dialect in the kind of more, I would say, sociolinguistic way of talking about dialect, into this huge pot that is so specific to this fictional town of Chucalissa, Mississippi. However, it's truly how I talk. Like, it's how I talk. It's how, like, my mom and daddy talk. Like, everybody hears Katori say, I'm finna go to the stove, or what you done. And my assistant, jokes all the time. He's like, oh my God, I'm a Southern person now, because, he's heard me be my Southern Black ass Memphis self. And, growing up, I never saw me. And the way that we speak, there's a beautiful musicality to it. It's actually a tonal language, and the fact that there is pitch and how you go up and how you go down or how you slide communicates something completely different. Like, you can say nigga as a question, you can say nigga with an exclamation, you can it's so many ways in the way that we communicate. Like, it's like Black folk be making music when they're just talking to each other. And there had been a conversation that happened early on about subtitling the show. Wow. It quickly died when I was like, that's racist. Because it kind of connects back to what Tamara was saying. Like, let's not, this is normal. And we need to celebrate local languages. We need to not feel as though the way to be American is to strip yourself of the thing that makes you so specific, the way that we hold culture on our tongues, the way that we pass down culture. It's through the way we tell stories and how we speak and how we communicate. And Black folks just got a singular style in regards to that. And so while that conversation did happen, and while there was, you know, a very uncompromising position that I took, you know, when the show aired, and we can talk about, you know, the reception of this language, it was a little discombobulating to me. And Patrik has got many texts at night where I'm like, what are these people on Black Twitter talking about? Where I was getting mad that other Black people were getting mad, saying that I had Black people sounding like slaves. And I was like, hold on.
Wow.
Number one, I was like, okay, people have never heard us talk this authentically on TV, particularly in the premium cable space. And you can look at The Wire a little bit, but like in this way, they ain't really ever heard it. They ain't never had to confront it like this. So I was like, okay, number one, that's what's happening. So it's novel, it's new. So it may be discombobulating. But number two, I think it exposed shame. The shame that we as Black people have when it comes to our history, that they're not talking like slaves, but they're talking like the descendants of slaves. And the fact that they have been able to keep that Africanness on their tongues and influence world culture, being and communicating and with that style, the fact that we created rap, and that's one of the greatest exports America has. The fact that this is a Africanistic way of speaking, the fact that, you know, Lamerta don't say street, he says screet. That's actually very much connected to West African languages. And so the fact that people's kind of responses, particularly when it came to like, oh, they got us talking like slaves, I knew that was like, oh, we are ashamed of what we went through. They think that because these people are talking in this way, that they're not educated, that they're dumb, that they're, you know, like, that's how poor people, that's below me. That's below me. How dare Katori have us talking like this, when in all actuality, it's a celebration. It's like, can you believe that Africa was able to stay and tattoo itself on our tongue? Can you believe that I can say certain things and you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Yes, you may not speak like that, but you understand my cool. You do. That to me, to show us speaking in that way unapologetically, to me is a revolution. To me, it's saying that I can be who I am. I do not have to bend to breaking in order to participate in America fully. So I was, as you can tell, I'm very worked up about this reaction. And I think it has a lot to do with that thing of like, I was like, I don't want us to be ashamed. I don't want us to ever feel as though something that is so inherently Black is something that is uneducated and lower than low. Yes, sometimes it is the least among us who talk like that, but can you imagine like the fact that it was able to live over these centuries, over all of that oppression? It to me is a sign of how amazing we are as a people. The fact that you got other, like my kids be watching YouTube all day, and there's this little white girl, she be trying to sound Black all day, and I'm just like, you cannot watch that no more. But you know but people, you know, think it's cool because it is. It is a beautiful, the way that Black folks talk, it is a beautiful way of communicating, and that reception I felt was very sad to me, but I understood it because I think it, like I said, was connected to shame.
Yeah, and I think it is a criticism that happens throughout sort of the history of Black culture. It's something Zora Neale Hurston faced.
Zora Neale, exactly.
Yeah, it's something August Wilson faced, where, you know, they were upset that he made us sound a certain way when really he was honoring the truth of the language. And I think PValley is very much the same way. And I think once people appreciate that musicality, they just can't, they're so into the show, you can't let it go. And the characters and once you're into the world, that's just another way, it just kind of bakes you in.
It's like you can't say Pank no other way but Pank. You know, it's not pink, it's Pank.
It's just Pank now. Yeah, exactly.
And we would have like we would even have like a lot of Black people from Mississippi, coming in as sort of, self-prescribed
Policing.
experts. Exactly. I'm from Mississippi and we don't talk like that. And it's like, I am from Mississippi and I have family members who talk like that. I was sitting around a table of them not that long ago and we were talking about PValley and I brought that issue up and they were surprised that people were had that criticism because they talk like that. So yeah.
My family is in New York City and they still speak like that. I had a Southern accent until I was about 6. People thought I was from the deep, I don't know what part of the deep South they thought I was from, but my family is from North Carolina and Virginia. And that's all I heard. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's what I heard in the neighborhood. And then you pepper in that strong New York accent. So when I'm at home and not even when I'm speaking to my family, but I think even more so now, like I love to speak in my accent. I love that native New York Southern twang. I love all of it and I embrace all of it. And I feel smarter. I don't like speaking one language. I never did. And I think that it would behoove America, particularly Black America, to like get into this. Be happy we're not speaking to you in French, or like be happy we're not speaking to you in Lingala. You know what I'm saying? This is something you can actually do a little bit of work to understand and to, embrace and, get into it and have a good time, Yeah.
And I think too, people appreciate, feeling like, especially white people, feeling like they are getting a look into something super authentic that is foreign to them and they don't know. And so the more, specific you can be, I always felt that with my gay shit. It's like, let me be as Black and gay as possible. And so the real shit that people don't get to see, because that's what people go, oh, that's really interesting. I've never seen this, a look into this world before. So
yeah.
But they don't want to do the work that's the thing. They want it to be easy. And so that is really why I think a lot of the material that we're saying is very watered down, because you have to translate it. And once you translate it, you lose the subtext, you lose the restraint, you lose all of the prestige. And you have to make a choice. Are you going to create a work for premium television that is on par with every other work that is being shown, on premium TV, on premium cable? Or are you going to explain this, expose it all, and water it down? And I don't think that altering the authenticity of a work serves the story. I don't think it actually serves storytelling, the process at all. So anyway,
exactly. And not to point out sort of the elephant in the room here, but Jocelyn, you're white.
An Irish girl. Irish.
And Irish. I'm very curious, because PValley does that so well. How did you approach breaking down and appreciating this language? How did you sort of work that?
I mean, I had experienced the original play, and then I had never had an issue about understanding it, because I come from a very rich linguistic region, which is Ireland, and we also come from an area where we have, without rehearsing, 800 years of oppression, but essentially we are a colonized country. So language and the performance of language is really, really important, and there's great pride in counties and in different regions of the country in their accent, and there's huge regional variation. And Irish, which is the language of Ireland, English, as you know, is an imposed language, but even in Irish, in Gaeilge, which is Irish, there are regional variations, and there is great pride. And so Connacht Irish, the people who speak Gaelic in the west, fight with people who speak Munster Irish in the south, and they're trying to each outdo each other in terms of the purity of the tongue, for want of a better word. And so entering into Katori's world, it just I had no problems with either understanding it because my ear was open, but also I think that you have to go to a language in order to understand a culture, and how that language is the performance of that culture. And if there is great pride in the performance of that language, then there's great pride in the culture. And so at the moment we're going through something of a controversy in Ireland in the last 2 days, which is Wild Mountain Thyme. Have you heard about this movie by John Patrick Shanley? You should look up the trailer on YouTube. And people are outraged by the Irish accents, which are deeply inauthentic. And it's to do, as Katori was mentioning, about shame, but also about the betrayal and the translation of Irishness into different kinds of versions. And so I do think for me, you're asking, for me, I'm Irish and I'm white, so I was having a very different experience of the language. I do know that there was a lot of resistance to people who looked like me during the process to the language, and I was genuinely not flabbergasted, not even astonished, but why wouldn't you try and make more work? Why wouldn't you try and do the work in order to cross and engage with that? So it was fascinating to me because I actually think it's about panic, and I think it's about white panic. And on some level, is that I hear sounds and words and I don't know what they are because they don't sound and look like generally how Black characters are presented on television or in movies, and therefore my ears shut down. So a lot of people who are reaching for the subtitle button was really surprising. It's like, no, you need to do the work, and that's what I mean about being uncompromising. Is this says do the work.
Yeah.
And the people reaching for the subtitles was wrong anyway.
Yeah.
Because the
well,
people who
did
closed captioning was doing all, and they should have just called me and asked me, Katori, what does this say? And said that they had like, what was it? Stout junk turned into style jean. It was insane.
Yeah. I like that you stood just so strong in these characters and these voices. I think one character probably everyone wants to talk about. I think the female gaze is very strong in the show, but I think the character that breaks down all the respectability, that breaks down everything, of course, is Uncle Clifford.
Yes.
So I would love to talk about the process of how that character came to be. Was there any sort of friction in understanding? I believe that character is so beautiful because he's based in joy instead of fear. There are moments when you're like, oh no, is someone going to find out? And are they is something bad going to happen? But that never happens. And instead you just get to enjoy this character.
Yes.
You get to, please talk about.
So Uncle Clifford, a lot of people always wonder, like, where did Uncle Clifford come from? And Uncle Clifford comes from my lived experience, my truth. Uncle Clifford is a fusion of three of my living ancestors. My mama, who don't take no shit. My daddy, who is a gun-toting person who don't take no shit. And my real Uncle Clifford, who, these three people are not queer, but the interesting balance of feminine and masculine energy in all three of them just has been so delightful for me to witness. And so as a woman growing up, seeing my mother, I knew that I could be like, very strong and uncompromising. Some people might call me unreasonable, but that's another story. But I think it has a lot to do with just, I saw a woman who really stood her ground in so many ways with people that she should have been afraid of. Like, she sometimes would forget that she was a woman, my mother. So all these three people in my life, their DNA is baked into the soul of the fictional Uncle Clifford. Something that I do like to do in my work is to take one of my living ancestors' names and christen a character with that name. So that's why Uncle Clifford's name is Uncle Clifford's name. When I initially started working on Uncle Clifford in the play version, Uncle Clifford was actually trans. But over the course of, it's been 10 years working on, the play version to the TV version, I would say Uncle Clifford became gender nonconforming and very much felt like a two-spirit being where masculinity and femininity was presented and embraced in equal measure. And so I lucked out in that I have always had a partner in Nico Anand, who plays Uncle Clifford and played Uncle Clifford from page one. Like, he literally read the first page that I ever wrote of the play PValley and has been with me on this odyssey, because it's been 10 years plus now, every step of the way. And so it was beautiful to have someone who is of the community and to be working in partnership, and trying to make sure that when we got to the small screen, that we visually articulated Uncle Clifford in a way that really made it clear that there's that she is a shapeshifter. You know, Uncle Clifford prefers the pronouns she and her, and everybody. She made everybody around her say that too. Even though I would say she is gender nonconforming.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's again growing up in Mississippi. It's sort of like Uncle Clifford represented when I was growing up, it was sort of like, okay, if you're gay, you know you're gay, but you know from a very young age, this is not something that's considered okay. So you quickly learn to code and hide. And then if you're lucky, eventually, you know, like gravitates towards like, you kind of find each other. Oh wait, are you too? Okay. And I literally remember driving with a friend who was gay and kind of pulled me out. And he would talk about another guy. I just know he fools around or whatever. And he literally just drove us to his house one day after school and basically outed him. You know, we all became like this group. But the thing that was interesting to me was you had the people who kind of could conform, and then you had the people who could not conform, who were just gay as gay could be, couldn't hide it if they wanted to, and somehow had the wherewithal to own it. And, you know, like I remember Miss Cotton Candy, junior high school, riding the bus to school, and Miss Cotton Candy was just gay, but strong. And so if you were a straight guy or whatever, or a straight girl who had the misfortune to think that because Miss Cotton Candy was swishy and gay and called Miss Cotton Candy, that you could fuck with Miss Cotton Candy, you know, you would get your nose snapped off because Miss Cotton Candy didn't take any shit. So being this closeted gay kid in junior high sitting on the bus watching Miss Cotton Candy go off and let people have it was like, it was like watching a superhero, like, oh my God, like, wow. And that's what Uncle Clifford represents to me. And I've seen people like that throughout my life, whether it was being in high school and driving up to Jackson at the age of 15 and 16 to go to the gay club and see the drag shows and watch Miss Smokey and P.D. LaBelle and all these people, you know, making beauty and art out of whatever. Like these people were garbage truck drivers and school bus drivers and working class Black men who, for those nights in that club, could suddenly be everything inside that they wanted to be. And that's to me what Uncle Clifford represented, someone who had decided to embrace all of that and put it on Front Street, and fuck you if you couldn't deal with it, because I'm also strong enough to let you have it if you try to give me grief about it. So yeah, what Katori had created in that character was just so special. And the way the story was being told, it wasn't a tragedy. It wasn't, you know, what's going to happen to him. It was like, this is the strongest, this is the character that anchors this whole ship. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up and clearly grew up in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, Brownsville. And our family has always been very involved in all of the arts, right? So, and I grew up during an era which was, you know, the crack era, which was hot. The streets were really hot, but they were hot with fashion and they were hot with luxury. And, you know, I was a kid and it really, to me, the Uncle Cliffords were the fashion, like they were running they were the fashion babies. Like they were the ones. So when Katori mentioned Uncle Clifford to me, I didn't flinch. It's just a normal part of my world. You know, the tough guys, you know, wanted to be well dressed and they wanted girls to like them. And they went to, you know, my cousins who were queer and who were dancing and who were at the balls and, you know, who were members of different houses. And like, you know, I just thought that this was, you know, what people did, you know. I knew that there was some friction. Like I wasn't clueless. Clearly I'm growing up in Brooklyn. And so there's some stories where like, you know, just like Patrik Ian just told, where you might get jumped on the train, you know, and someone might say, you know, call you like a name, but they got worn out just as well because you were from Brownsville and you had a community that would defend you. you know? And so I, you know, again, grew up with this sense of entitlement that like, yeah, isn't this what people are doing? Like, isn't your cousin isn't your gay cousin also the most fashionable and smart and well-traveled person in your crew? Like I was, you know, it took me a while. I had to leave New York, not even because I lived in Paris even when I was as a kid, and it was the same thing. And so Uncle Clifford to me would be the person who was running things and would be the person to hold everything together and would be the person who had access to, you know, music and art and culture, because that was the, you know, and I don't know how this, I don't know, Ian, Patrik, Ian, how it got this way, but gay culture is art and it's luxury and it's fab and it's sexy. And it doesn't even matter whether you have money or not, you're just fucking it. And that's what I grew up knowing. And so Uncle Clifford to me was, yeah, I didn't have to think twice about what Uncle Clifford looked like, what she sounded like. The only thing we had to figure out was their pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that I was just like, well, I don't know what they prefer to be called as a she. And we had a conversation about that, but everything else was just, it was easy, you know. It was very, very centered, you know, and also a part of the world, like where the tough guys in the club, you know, the bouncers, the drug dealers, like they're fine with it, and they're going to come at you if you come at Uncle Clifford.
Yeah.
That's what I grew up knowing, and it, you know, clearly the world had different plans, and I had to relearn some things, but that was the center, and I really loved that Katori was writing Uncle Clifford from that center.
There's also this thing of like, okay, there's homophobia. There's this sort of idea that exists out there that Black people are somehow more homophobic. But I always found, growing up in the South, okay, don't ask, don't tell. Like, you didn't talk about it. It's not discussed openly, but that gay family member was a part of the fabric of the family like anybody else.
Yeah.
That gay cousin would be in the kitchen with grandma and the aunts and whomever, helping to cook and doing all those things. And you may not talk about that gay cousin's love life or sexuality, but it was kind of understood that you don't criticize them, you don't call them names, you respect them, and if you come for them, the family's gonna come for you. I never knew anyone that was like thrown out because they were gay. I'm sure that happened,
Yeah,
but I didn't know any Black people that happened to. It was like, you may not have been completely open, but you were accepted and you were a part of the community and the world. And if you were bold enough to own your shit, people respected that. And it was almost like this thing of the exact opposite of homophobia. If you owned your shit and you were just gay and you didn't give a fuck and you made people know that you give a fuck, that's how Uncle Clifford's came to be. That's how an Uncle Clifford can exist, because Uncle Clifford is strong enough to stand up to you if you come for her, you know? And that's what I always saw from Miss Cotton Candy at a young age on down. So the more you can kind of try to get to that point. And I think that's the thing that allowed me to, when I finally got to make film, just own it and embrace it and just say, fuck it, I'm doing gay Black shit. No, there's been no gay Black shit, but that's what I'm doing. That was my way of owning my shit. I couldn't necessarily put on the heels and the this and the that, but I could write as authentically as I could. And what was wonderful about what Katori did was, Uncle Clifford, as beautiful as she is and as glamorous as the look is, she's not a caricature and she's not a clown. You know what I mean? She's someone who is loving and having this interesting relationship with this guy. That happens. That shit happens all the time. I've dated guys like Lil Murda, and it happens. So this idea that people think this is so unrealistic, or they, oh, why is he with him? That's how it is. That is how it is. Who is the rapper who, is it Young Thug? Who's the rapper who plays with all that kind of stuff? Like,
it's Young Thug.
There are men who just like that, who like what Uncle Clifford is specifically. And that is what needs to be portrayed. So,
and I just want to say, I know that we know we're saying all of this. This is our lived experience. We do understand that we do have queer homeless youth out there. We do have people who don't have families, and people whose families and friends and community have been violent towards them. And, you know, it's not a either or, you know, it's an and, it's all, you know. So we just want to recognize that not everyone has had this experience, and, you know, just to put that out there, that this is our experience. You know,
absolutely.
But,
and I think sort of, I don't know, I think with the Uncle Clifford character, it comes with the asterisk of the history of queer representation, where so often, you know, the powers that be, Hollywood, these producers, white people, traditionally just want to see that sad narrative of the homeless queer youth, and, you know, over, you know, who's just, you're just waiting for the horrible thing that's going to happen to them. And with Uncle Clifford, it's, you know, it's this experience that's also real, and it's positive usually. You know, of course he's going to face issues, but like you said, he stands up to it. And so it's in that where it's kind of like a breath of fresh air, where it's like, finally we're getting this story. You know, it's not, we know that it's not someone saying this is the whole story. It feels so much more like, thank you for finally bringing this story into in my opinion, sort of the pantheon of Black television. And that's why I thought it was so cool that you had Loretta Devine play his grandmother, to really tie that connection, where it's, you know, Loretta is Black TV royalty history, and to directly kind of tie Uncle Clifford to that. I don't know, to me it just it worked to sort of expand rather than to kind of limit.
Absolutely, it's that thing of, you know, representation, and representation doesn't always necessarily have to be about diversity and inclusion in that regard, but also how do we represent a Black experience that embraces joy and show another version of Black love that's not heteronormative, but it's Black love between, you know, Uncle Clifford and Little Murder, is Black love between a grandmother and her grandchild, is Black love between Black women in this space that can be exploitative, like all these different permutations of Black love that we haven't ever really encountered because we don't think Black love exists there.
Yeah. Absolutely wonderful.
I'll just say very quickly about Loretta, just as an interesting tidbit. In my first film, Punks, there is a scene where the lead character, who is really paranoid about HIV, and to the point where he's really paralyzed his in terms of his love scene, and he's constantly going to this clinic to get tested. And Loretta played the clinician who tests him, and he comes into the gay center or whatever and gets this test, and she's giving him this questionnaire, and she's like, and he's like, no, I really had sex this time. And she goes through this, you had anal sex? And he's like, no. Or, you know, vaginal sex? But what kind of sex did you have? And he's like, a blowjob. And she's, a blow, if you don't get out of here. And come. But she tests him anyway. And then he comes back to get the results. And she's like, look, of course it's negative. But let me just tell you something. You know, you deserve love like everybody else. And don't let fear paralyze you. So get your ass out there. Don't come back in until you get a real piece of ass. And it was very much, and I love this idea of like Black women, and I've always put that in my work, but certainly Uncle Clifford's grandmother, Ernestine, represents that. Black women, I think historically have embraced the, you know, the queer, not all the time, obviously, as Tamara pointed out, but maybe more so than Black men, they have embraced and supported and been there, you know what I mean? Like if you read the book, All Boys Aren't Blue, this beautiful young adult story George Johnson wrote about coming up queer in, I think, Virginia. And he talks about his grandmother seeing in him something and embracing him because he didn't have a community, a support, and like taking him with her because she knew he was special and he needed that. And I think Black women do that all the time. And Ernestine, to me, represented that really, really nicely.
Yeah, I think throughout PValley, you see women caring for each other in different ways, manipulating each other, like you said, Katori. And I do want to, we have two more quick questions. I really do want to address how the show uses colorism. I mean, I think it does it so well, almost better than any other show I've seen on TV this year. I think PValley was the show that really highlighted the dangers of colorism, the privileges, and also the funniness, the hilarity of it. It's so funny when they make fun of that light-skinned girl. It's so funny. And so I would really love to kind of talk about in the writer's room how you approach that. I feel like it's a complicated conversation. A lot of times white audiences are like, I can understand racism, but colorism, that's like 3D. It's too complicated. So how did you approach that in the room?
from jump, we always knew that we were going to delve into all the isms, and colorism being like a distant cousin, or not even a distant cousin, a cousin of racism, and the fact that particularly in the strip club, colorism is so amplified due to there being this kind of thing that I think all people have inherited, right? Whether you Black, white, or whatever, where if you are not in alignment with a Eurocentric ideal of beauty, then you are not beautiful. So I know I've dealt with it in my own life, being brown and having a certain grade, I put that in quotes, of hair, thinking that, well, if I go to the mall with my light-skinned friends are going to be hollered way more than I will be. And it was just fact that happened. It happened. And so I think we baked in colorism into the story because we knew that we wanted a lighter skinned actress to play the role of Autumn Night. If you have a dancer coming into that space that is mostly darker skinned women, there is going to be tension because it's what the men are preferring. And so in a night, a lighter skinned woman is going to make way more money than a dark skinned woman. And the fact that you have, Mercedes, basically, they clocking that from episode 1, when Uncle Clifford and Mercedes are in the back, and they're just like, she didn't do nothing but lay up there looking light. And then Uncle Clifford go, well, that's what yellow bitches do, because that's what they can do, because that's how the world has been set up. And so just from jump, we wanted to make sure that, I didn't want to be didactic about it, but I felt, the casting someone that was going to allow us to really, in subtle ways, deal with it, in humorous ways, deal with it, was just, very key. And real talk, the colorism it impacts Miss Mississippi in that she's color struck, where she feels as though because of her darker skin, she is having, issues with thinking that she's beautiful. She is insecure. And so when, Corbin, who is, another light-skinned person, someone who is biracial, who is trying to grapple with that, walks into the club episode 2 and needs his ass beat because that's his kick. We see her like, man, all that yellow wasted. Like it's a shame that he's so light, but he still can't pass.
And then Uncle Clifford gets her together. You go get your color struck ass out, daughter.
Yeah, like gets her together real quick. And it's been interesting because once again, the reception has been very complicated in how we have dealt with colorism, because I think that some people felt upset that and triggered even about us addressing, like, why Mercedes always got to be, throwing shade at Autumn? Why is it that, the dark-skinned girl has to hate the light-skinned girl? And that's just some real stuff that happens at the club. It's all those 40 clubs that I visited, that stuff was happening. And it has nothing to do with Mercedes thinking that she's less than. It's everything to do with her knowing how the world is going to reward a woman who is lighter skinned, but it's not putting in half as much of the work. And so I think even though some people have charged us with being colorist in our writing, I think there's a difference between being colorist and actually holding up a mirror to colorism.
I've got none of those notes, actually. And I think it's, and I didn't get any of the notes on Uncle Clifford. And I've got my super tough cousins watching this. I think my phone blew up more about PValley than did any other show that I worked on. And that's because my community, my primary and secondary communities, were glued to the screen. And I just think that I don't have access to those tertiary cultures, Black cultures. So I had zero feedback about the colorism of it all, the language of it all. I had heard nothing. This stuff was new to me. Just hearing it even from you guys and what you were facing out there, I'm always shocked. This is the same way as on the writer. Really? Really is that happening? And it's a little naive because I'm like, no, this is it. This is how, this is pretty much, this is law, so I didn't have any of that experience, getting any of those notes. If anything,
girl, I was on Black Twitter and Facebook. That's where all the stuff coming from.
You know, I know.
Black
But
Twitter.
I'm not saying that they didn't exist. I'm just saying that in Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, and Crown Heights, I think people were just like, yeah, that's it. That's how it is, you know, and that was it. So it's really interesting to me to have to have all of these perspectives, you know, be so present, you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I think one more question. I think we're at an hour. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Obviously, the fans are so excited for season 2. Is there anything you can tease? Is there anything you can tell us? Themes you're excited to cover? Please give us something from the
Can't tell y'all nothing because the room ain't started yet, y'all. I can't tell y'all.
Give the people something, Katori.
Come on.
Okay, here a little something. So, spoiler alert, I guess, or not spoiler alert. We're living through a pandemic. So I feel as though I am always in awe of Black folk and how we survive and how we take care of each other when other people don't. I am always in awe in how we figure shit out and we're innovative and we figure stuff out first. So the fact that strip clubs all across America have been riding this wave with this virus going up and down, and it seems like we're about to head into another lockdown. The fact that dancers, sex workers in general have been able to digitize the strip club experience is a story worth exploring. And I also feel as though, the virus of COVID and the virus of racism has collided in a way that no one could have thought of, right? And I think it's so important for this show that is centering Black lives in a way that it's evident, like Black lives matter to us. And so we have to tell the story of now and tell the story of how we're surviving and what better way through the lens of a strip club. There aren't going to be, I feel like a lot of TV shows are dealing with COVID and trying to figure out ways to tell that story, but they're not dealing with the intersection of COVID and race. And I think it is our responsibility to do so. And so I think we're going to, whenever we get into that room, we are going to embark on a story that I think will, be humorous, but be poignant and hopefully be powerful and be, a time capsule. Like I want people to look 10 or 20 years from now and be like, Black folks went through that. And how do you know? Because of what PValley did in season 2.
Great. I want to thank you all again for joining us for this wonderful talk with the writer's room of PValley. This was so special. I feel like we got to really dive into so many things that make the show so important, so special, so just of this moment. And I am so thankful again to Patrik, Ian, Tamara, Jocelyn, Katori Hall, the whole team. Thank you.
Thank you.